week, bar none, and it's been a busy week, is the war that ISIS has declared on the sovereign republic of Philippines. Now, most people associate ISIS with the Middle East and North Africa. Philippines, of course, is an East Asian state, but they have declared war and have conquered cities, at least one, in the south of Philippines. This is an incredibly big story. For years now, many years, there's been a terroristic Islamist insurgency in part of the Philippines, but it's only been in recent years where the group have coalesced and declared themselves ISIS and have pledged loyalty both to the ideology and what there remains of a command of ISIS in the Middle East. Now, it happened at an incredibly suspicious time. It happened when the Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte was in Moscow speaking with Vladimir Putin about increased military cooperation and the purchase of military weapons. This took on an even deeper meaning as Duterte said that it would require the most sophisticated modern weapons which Russia has to offer and currently Philippines doesn't have in its own arsenals in order to wage what Duterte promised would be a total war against this Islamist insurgency. Now, why is the mainstream media covering this up? Is it because this is happening as Duterte's foreign policy shift is taking Manila closer to China in terms of political orbit and closer to Moscow in terms of a military and indeed general wider geopolitical orbit? Is it because the attack came at a very suspicious time? Were there people who sought to undermine Duterte's sovereigntist style of government, who told ISIS when and where to attack? These are all things that will hopefully come out in the future. Duterte is obviously a very transparent president, and crucially, Philippines, if it remains stable, will be a place that will act as a kind of fulcrum, a kind of intermediary between US hegemonic power and the rising, frankly already risen, powers of the other side of that multipolar divide. This is, of course, Russia and China. Duterte has developed a historically good relationship with China in the context of traditional 20th century Philippines-China relations. The same can be said of Russia's Vladimir Putin. Unlike Putin and Xi Jinping, president of China, Duterte has not yet met with Donald Trump, but a transcript of a phone conversation they had was recently leaked to the media, like just about everything else is from the Trump administration. The phone call showed that the two were very friendly, incredibly cordial, and that they agree on everything ranging from North Korea, the important role of China in the region, and of course Duterte's famous and deeply important, as we've discussed here before, war on drugs. Philippines must remain stable and it must remain sovereign. All those, and not just ISIS, who want to destabilize the country must pay a very heavy price. Until then, Duterte now is in the midst of two wars. He's in the midst of a drug war, which is incredibly violent, which is incredibly dangerous, and now he's in the midst of total war on ISIS, who are interested in not just causing death and terror, but on top of that are interested in creating political instability through conquest of Philippines territory, the same way that they have conquered parts of Iraq, parts of Syria, and parts of Libya. It's important that he wins war on both of those fronts, and indeed they are related. The drugs cartels, the drug dealers, they are financing ISIS. ISIS in many parts of the world are controlling the narcotics supply both inward and outward, and the money derived from these illicit, illegal sales is financing them. That's why the drug war and the war on ISIS must continue with double the effort, and I believe that President Duterte is the correct man to execute it.
You stated that drug dealers should be executed. Do you think that this will be likely to include the policemen and politicians that control the drug trade in the Philippines?
Well, it should include anyone and everyone who's involved in an illegal black market trade that is causing all sorts of crimes and depravity, ranging from common corruption to mass murder, mass rape, and the total destruction and degradation of entire segments of society, which are incredibly widespread in every country with the drug problem. It's particularly bad in the Philippines, which is why some of the poorest, some of the most excluded have voted for Duterte, and they support his initiatives more and more. They vote for him again in even bigger numbers if there were an election tomorrow. Now, of course, corrupt officials in the drugs trade in the Philippines is a big problem, and Duterte has said he's going to go after them. He's going to deputize and empower, to appropriate a word from the liberals, ordinary people to go after the bandits, the scoundrels, the knaves, all of these terrible people. He's empowering ordinary people to go after a problem which previous governments, working with previous law enforcement regimes, just could not or did not want to handle. And those, including in law enforcement, who are on the wrong side of criminality, they will be and are, in fact, being punished by Duterte.
Yes, last month there was a piece in The Guardian about the brutality of Duterte's war on drugs. And I think, these people, either they try to justify their own habits or they are completely ignorant of worldwide realities, because there really is no other way, is there, to rid the country of this.
Well, when it comes to brutality, The Guardian supports fascist violence against the civilians of Donbass.
Absolutely.
They support the discrimination of Orthodox Christians. They support the death of Shias. They support the death of Christians, of moderate Sunnis, of anyone who isn't a Salafist in Syria, isn't a Wahhabist in Syria, and across the wider Middle East. So when it comes to brutality, we shall take no lessons from The Guardian. But of course, this problem, as you rightly say, is a problem that many Western minds, many Guardian reader Western minds, simply can't wrap their heads around. They think that it's some far-out hippie smoking a doobie, listening to Jefferson Aeroplane, man. It isn't like that. These are people on some of the worst kinds of meth imaginable. It's worse than even the heroin that these people do. It causes these people to be rambunctious, uncontrollable, violent maniacs, literally maniacs. And Duterte is saying enough is enough. The halfway measures, the turning the other way, the corruption has got to end. He's a tough man who's taking on a very tough and very serious problem. And let's just hope that other people see him as a pioneer in this, which is absolutely what he is.
Absolutely, and you could compare these people to the terrorist factions operating in Syria.
They are terrorists.
They absolutely are. I mean, they're sort of completely insane.
Yes, and violent.
On drugs, as many of the terrorists.
Well, it's good that we need to explore that further. It was Gaddafi, no less, who warned the world that at the time when Hillary Clinton and friends were invading Libya, that these terrorists who were creating a violent insurgency in the country, they were on drugs. And where did the drugs come from? They came from the enemies of Libya, and we all know who those are. Gaddafi warned about this. Others did too. The drug problem is a real problem. It finances terrorism, and many terrorists, including ISIS and Al-Qaeda fighters in Syria and Iraq, and of course previously in Libya, still in Libya frankly, they're on various substances. The drugs problem isn't about recreation, it's a terrorist problem and must be handled with the same exactitude, the same efficiency, the same ruthlessness.
Yes, absolutely. And I've spoken to civilians from Syria who told me that the terrorists that they'd come across had been high on drugs.
Yeah.
And therefore very, very dangerous.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you very much, David. And another related question from Stephen in England. If you think drug dealers should die, what about Big Pharma?
Well, Big Pharma is an equally important issue to your local and regional violent, knife-wielding, gun-toting drug dealer. Some of the drugs, the substances produced by Big Pharma are as bad, and in some cases worse, than the most vile substances that one can buy on the street. So not only should Big Pharma be regulated, Big Pharma should be forcibly broken up by the state. I'm all for small and medium-sized business. I'm for low tax or no tax. Tax is theft. But when it comes to the big corporations, they ought to pay for the power they wield over society. They've got to pay one way or the other. In this case, both. They should be more regulated. Some of them should be broken up under existing racketeering and monopoly laws, and some of the worst vile substances these people produce should be totally obliterated. They should be made illegal and put in the same category. Oh, there's so many thought. There's Ritalin, there's Prozac, there's many. There's new ones that come out every week. These mind-controlling substances substances, they lead to murder, suicide, dysfunction of all sorts, violent attacks, assault, you name it. So Big Pharma is an equally important problem, but I will have none of this nonsense from the people that think they're being all cool and earthy and left-wing by standing up for the local neighborhood motorist drug dealer because he doesn't have the kind of income that the people in charge of Big Pharma do, the companies like Pfizer, which is one of the big ones, just to name one. It's different for the following reasons. White-collar criminals destroy society gradually, slowly, with every dollar they make and every pill they put into the marketplace, with every doctor they bribe. And oh yes, doctors can be as corrupt as policemen, they can be as corrupt as politicians, they can be as corrupt as businessmen. You betcha. So all of these people, they're all culpable, but they do it gradually. The man with a knife and a gun uses it, and he uses it in sporadic fits of rage. It's important to cleanse the streets first, because they are in the closest contact with ordinary people.
Which is why the Liberals don't quite mind these people, because they're not in immediate danger of these people, because they're not close to them.
Absolutely, the Liberals have it great.
But the Filipinos are, that's why most of them voted, well, certainly the poor Filipinos voted for Duterte.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right, and it's true.
But it doesn't affect the Liberals.
The Liberals,
so they don't care. They can afford to feel sorry for these criminals.
Okay, let's take not Trump Tower, but let's take a tower analogy. The chairman of the company who makes these horrible legal pills is living on the top floor. In the middle of these liberals that you're talking about doing a combination of the drugs from above and the drugs from below, but they're sheltered in that tower. The people at the bottom of society, they have to contend with the murderers, they have to contend with the rapists, and Duterte gets it, and the sooner Western politicians get it, the sooner the streets will be cleaned up from the scum that are making first world countries into hellholes.
Yes, well...